Good afternoon, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Coming to you today again through video, but again, not live. My apologies, but we'll get back to live videos here soon. In the meantime, today we're going to talk about charter, authority, acts of God, and force majeure. So let's get started, and as we can see, this is the Legal Information Institute, WEX. Charter, broadly the highest law of an entity. More specifically, in corporate law, the Articles of Incorporation. In public law, the instrument by which a municipality is incorporated. Example, city charter, county charter, state charter, federal charter. Where does a federal get their charter? Is it an international organization? And if it's an international organization, where do they get their charter? Where do all these charters start from? That's what we're going to talk about next in authority. But as we go on, it says this type of charter includes the highest laws of the municipality and its organizational structure. In legislative law, a government act that establishes a publicly funded business or undertaking. In popular usage, the lease of a bus, airplane, ship, or other usually large or expensive vehicle for transportation. A person who signs such a lease is said to charter the vehicle. The vehicle used under this agreement is said to be chartered. And as we see, it says civics, and then it says government, local governmental law, and then it says commerce. So in civics, we see it only involves government. So if you're considered a civilian, then you're considered part of the government. If you're not a civilian and you're operating in commerce, then you're operating under what's called business law, business organizations, commercial law, corporations, commercial activities, banking. And then they say transportation. And when we look at this, it says in popular usage, the lease, which is the contracting of a bus, airplane, or ship, which is the shipment, or the vessel, the vessel. It is a contract to use a vessel. Contract being maritime, the vessel being a shipment is admiralty. Okay? So when they use when they make up a contract, and then they buy a stamp and put it in an envelope, they are leasing the shipping services of the U.S. Postal Service, which is under the United States Post Office. And they are using a vessel in their corporate charter. Okay? The paperwork itself is the contract. The envelope with the stamp on it is the lease of the ship and the services from the United States Post Office. So there's a contract inside, and then the stamp, the purchase of the stamp, is the lease of a shipping service. Okay? Right there, in doing so, they have entered admiralty jurisdiction. They have left maritime jurisdiction and entered admiralty jurisdiction. If it is a simple contract, it is a private contract, and it remains between two people, and they don't need that third-party shipper. They are the carrier of the contract themselves to the other party of the contract, and they don't need a third party carrier. Okay? And this is also in regards to aviation and railroads. Railroads, we're learning, is one of the more important ones because it has to do with the military shipments, which is what your admiralty really is. It's under the naval forces of shipping. Okay? Anybody has any questions on this, feel free to get a hold of me through one of my other forum platforms that I'll be, or just put a note in the comments section. The next one is the authority. Like we were talking about in the charter, we're talking about where do they get their authority for that specific charter. In here we say, again, legal information. This is the way they define it. And their definition comes from NOLO's plain English. Plain English. Plain hyphen English. It cannot be legal language. And so you won't see any supposed legal language in the real authority, but under their definition, we will see legal language. Even in the plain English, which is not common English. A power to act, or it's not both, it's one or the other. To order others to act. The only way one can order another to act is in compliance with an actual contract, and that is only between the two parties. If you're using your power to order others to act upon a third party not involved as person or entity, then you are not using that authority properly. You are using extrajudicial or extraterritorial, extra-jurisdictional, extra-venue. You're using authority that is outside of your charter. The original contract. The charter is the original contract for that supposed authority-giving entity. And if you have authorities under that to order others to act, they can only be, those orders can only be administered to others under the same authority. The same authority. Often one person or entity gives another the authority to act as an employer to an employee, a principal to an agent, a corporation to its officers, or a government to an agency. A court decision is used to make a point or support an argument. Notice there is nothing in here about enforcement, because all of their enforcement is only under contract authority. They have to have a charter. Charter. Broadly, the highest law of an entity. The entity which they operate under is the municipality that gives them that authority. Okay? And again, we see it's commerce. So authority is given through commerce. Life events. Employment. You notice commerce says business law, agency, business organizations, and corporations. That's all this stuff here. Court decision used to make a point or support an argument. Nothing about enforcement. And then we see life events and it says employment. That's what they speak about here. An employer to an employee. If an employer tells you as an employee that you have to file taxes, then are you subject to a higher authority than your employer simply because your employer says so? If your employer is subject to that higher authority and you file an application for employment, then you are in fact subjecting yourself to that same authority. This is why we have to be very careful in our life events, in knowing the legal processes in regards to commerce and the actual authority of which all of it comes from. Okay? The legal process, again, we're talking about appellate procedure, civil procedure, military. That's military, not commercial. Courts, criminal procedure. Criminal is always considered civil. Always. We'll be speaking about that at a later time, but criminal procedures are always considered civil. Even if you bring them on private matter, it's considered a civil procedure for a criminal purpose. Okay? It's still a civil procedure, because if you go to one of their courts to enforce a tort, you have to invoke a trust operation. You have to bring in a higher authority than the authority that's presented by their courts, which only give a decision used to make a point or support an argument. When you, on the private side, take somebody that's committed a crime against you into one of their courts, you have to prove that their authority is under your higher authority. Your authority is a power to act. You have no orders to act. You have no way to order others to act. You have the power to act in and of itself. That power to act comes because you are in fact an act yourself. Yourself is an action in all times. You are not a noun known by a name. You are an act, always in motion, a verb, in fact. You are an act of God. That is your power to act. That is your authority. At common law, an overwhelming event caused exclusively by natural forces whose effects could not possibly be prevented. That's what they're trying to prevent, people, is you. They're trying to prevent you from asserting your power to act outside of their authority. In modern jurisdictions, act of God is often broadened by statute to include all natural phenomenon whose effects could not be prevented by the exercise of reasonable care and foresight. What they're talking about here in including natural phenomena whose effects could not be prevented by the exercise of reasonable care and foresight is in fact the damage and disasters that they speak of. In regards to accidents, if you have homeowners insurance and an act of God known as a tornado comes along and destroys your home, but your insurance claim or your insurance stipulates that it's not subject to acts of God, then you're not covered. And that's why they use that. And it again is by statute, which in and of itself is a contract under 48 CFR 52.212-5. If you read that, that is a federal regulation under the Federal Acquisitions Regulations, because they want to acquisition your property through this statute. And that statute 48 CFR 52.212-5 says specifically, and I quote, contract terms and conditions required to implement statutes or executive orders hyphen commercial items. Look that up and read that over and over until you get it. They can only acquisition things through contracts, and those contracts are denoted as the statutes or executive orders, and that 48 CFR 52.212-5 is an executive order to the states, not to the individual people. It is an executive order to the states to comply through their statutes with the contract that is in place. Nothing more, nothing less. Force majeure is a provision commonly found in contracts that frees both parties from obligation if an extraordinary event prevent one or both parties from performing. As an act of God, I cannot be deceitful. As an act of God, I cannot lie. As an act of God, I cannot take advantage of another man. In enforcing provisions that are commonly found in contracts, I am prevented from being able to allow them to enforce it, because the contract has legal terms and are all against acts of God. In my eyes, as a child of God, these events must be unforeseeable and unavoidable, and not the result of the defendant's actions. Hence, they are considered an act of God. Every action that I commit is, in fact, an act of God first and foremost, because He created me. I am not a natural disaster. We tear apart these words, folks. This is my duty to show you people this stuff. Like I said, in these contracts, a court decision to make a point or support an argument in regards to statutes to include all natural phenomenon whose effects could not be prevented as disasters. Have you guys ever taken apart the word and taken the root or the prefix dis off and looked up aster and come to find out that aster is a word, a plant of the daisy family that has bright red flowers, typically of purple or pink, as we see here, is an aster. But as we go on, that's the noun, okay, of a flower. In biology, which also includes these flowers, the aster, it's a biological creature, not an entity. An entity is a commercial abstract. Creatures are creatures of God. I am a creature. Only other people or other creatures in likeness and image define me as a man or a human or whatever. I am, in fact, my own description use of child of God or creature of God. a radiating array of microtubules associated with the centrosome in a dividing cell. That's on a cellular level. Every cell in my body. And it comes from Greek, Latin, aster, aster, star, or a star. I am a star in the sense of a star. Forming nouns denoting poor quality, as in criticaster. Botany, forming nouns denoting incomplete resemblance, is an oleaster. Incomplete resemblance. And that's what they're using in these courts, folks. They're using incomplete resemblance. So when they present their assumption of the facts before the court, you fix the presumption or assumption by completing the resemblance in a likeness and image as an act of God. And so, there we have it for today, folks. I'll do another one here shortly. But like I said, I'm not doing live, so don't expect it right away. But I'll be posting them. And as soon as I get back up and running live, I'll be letting everybody know. In the meantime, please keep paying attention. Keep watching these videos. They'll be on my YouTube channel, all my other forums, and be expecting them on Facebook soon. Meantime, remember, folks, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this. So God bless. I love you. But please share your love with me by hitting that PayPal link and sharing some love through there. I really need it. In the meantime, again, God bless. You people are stars. If you just remember, you are the image and likeness of the original star.